it seems that you've made it to the breakout dedicated to the work of media. This session will be moderated by Mrs. Paola Ceresseti. I would just like to share with you a few instructions on how to navigate this room if you want to contribute to the discussion. So you can use the chat function, which is in the middle at the bottom of your screen. I will be monitoring that chat and make sure that any questions or comments are passed to Paola, who will be moderating. But you can also use the raise hand function. If you go to participants, find your name, and you should be seeing a little hand raised. If at any time you have any question, please let us know and we will deal with it. Paola, over to you, I guess.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get in the room. Do you hear me? Yeah, I think so. Good.
Yes, and you are in the right room. We are
I'm in the right room.
Dedicated to media, so the first step is done.
That's thank you so much, Diplo, for inviting me to talk about this important issue about what journalists can do, which challenges they have to face for navigating in this digital, I would say, biotop, special biotop, which is Geneva, ecosystem biotop. You can choose the term you prefer. And I was thinking and listening to the comments of the journalists working here in Geneva. We have almost between 150 and 200 journalists accredited here at the Palais des Nations, at the United Nations in Geneva. The whole this media had to change their way to work pretty violently during the pandemic. They were used to walk in the Palais des Nations all day, to chat with diplomats, to chat with experts, to get news from the people, to get different sources for news. And suddenly the Palais des Nations was completely empty and the people were working from home. So they lose the direct contact to the people and they were forced to find another way to work. This pandemic was a very instructive moment for journalists, in my opinion. I have to say I'm a former journalist also. I'm working now for the Swiss government, but have been 27 years long a journalist. So I still remember and I pretty good understand the problem you have to face as a journalist when you don't have direct personal access to the people. To control your news, to know what to get different sources, to know to create the context in which you can develop your news. During this time of pandemics, there were another question. There was I love the way the Director General of the WHO. Mr. Dr. Tedros used a term. He spoke about a Nymphodemia. This is a word between information and pandemia. And Nymphodemia is a kind of a lot of information coming to the scene, coming to the people. Not all information verified, a lot of fake news, a lot of technical information difficult to understand for the wide public. And the journalists were there and they tried to make their job. The job is to moderate between the origin of information and the public, providing different sources, providing the context, providing explanation. And in this infodemia, the work of journalists in Geneva became very difficult. On the other side, this going digital opened a lot of new possibilities. My colleagues of the WHO, they are overwhelmed now from journalists following the press briefing at the WHO. since they are digital. So you can be there and listen to Dr. Tedros sitting in Lima or sitting in Bangkok. Before, you had to be here physically. There is more inclusiveness and more transparency, of course. But on the other side, you have also, how can I explain it? You have also a lot of journalists coming to press conference, to press briefing and asking questions. Journalists who are not specialists. So they ask questions in a very generic way. And they make the people based here very frustrated because they say, hey, we are the specialists, we know the story, we know the context, and we don't come to the word, we don't come to the opportunity to ask a question because there is too many people in the digital space. So these two are just two of the aspects of the change brought by the pandemic in the work of the journalists here in Geneva. And Teresa, I don't know what you mean, but I would like to see if there is some journalist with us in the room who can provide his own experience.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paola. Please feel free, any of our guests, to intervene directly. You can just unmute yourselves and participate in this discussion. Alternatively, as I said in the beginning, you're more than welcome to use the chat function. So feel free to just jump in at this moment. If not, Paola, while we're waiting, maybe what makes Geneva kind of more specific in compared to other comparable policy centers? Like, what are some of the unique challenges? Many of those that you have talked about can possibly be applied to some other policy centers because kind of the pandemic has hit everybody. You know, some of the challenges have been happening everywhere. But would you say that there is a uniqueness really for Geneva in this respect?
For journalists also, there is a special spirit in Geneva because of the fact that generally the work done in Geneva is a very practical work done by the international organization, NGOs. There is less politics and more concrete practical work with the results that have an influence on everyday life. And that makes the people here in Geneva also, how can I say? I would say less diplomatic, more concrete, more direct. And for journalists, it's interesting because they have a pretty direct access to the actors here in Geneva. It is absolutely not complicated for them. They have their working places at the Palais des Nations, and they meet the people all the day. They know personally most of the important actors here in Geneva. This is a kind of directness of the access to the sources here in Geneva, which is very particular, very special for Geneva. On the other side, you can also come. It's easier to come as a journalist under pressure because if you know all the actors, you can also have the feedback from the actors who are not very happy with maybe a critic paper you wrote, or and that's why there are a series of guidelines at the UN also to protect journalists, for example. And this is very interesting. This is one of the example of the changes brought by the Pandemia now. Physically, in the press room of the Palais des Nations, only journalists are allowed. You cannot go as a representative of the government, of an NGOs, of an international organization. You cannot enter the press room during a press briefing because journalists have to feel free to to ask their questions and not to be disturbed by maybe a member of a government who will influence the press conference or influence what the speaker are saying. So in the physical room, journalists are protected by rules. In the digital space, they are not. Everybody can enter a press briefing. I mean, WHO, to remain to the same example, WHO have 3 press briefing in a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, with the Director General, Dr. Tedros, and there they accept everybody. So you can go and listen. You can also listen maybe a critical question of a journalist based here in Geneva, even if you are seated somewhere else. And you can maybe find that the question of the journalist was not very good for your government. You maybe will try to intervene on a journalist. They're less protected in the digital space. And in my opinion, one of the big challenges is now with this new digital ecosystem is to find a way to allow journalists to work in a safe space, in the total respect of the press freedom.
Thank you very much, Paola. I now turn to our guests again to intervene with any questions and interventions. Just please unmute yourself and go ahead. And I can see that there is a message in the chat. There is a question in the chat from Dylan Farrell, who is also a journalist by training. And the question is, Paola, how do you think the post-pandemic Geneva press conferences and journalism will be different from the pre-COVID system? Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Dylan, for your question. I have some ideas, but I think we have still to think about it and to find really the better way to organize a setup which will allow journalists to do their job, because journalists are, and I will repeat it every day, journalists provide a very important service of mediation between information. They take the information, they take the source, they make a job of verification, they make a job of providing additional information to put the information in the context, and then they give the whole packaging to the public. It's a very important job, and without this job, I think we have big difficulties to have a well-functioning democracy. So that's why we have to really think about a setup in Geneva to help journalists doing their job in the best ways possible. I have a couple of ideas. As I said, they should be journalists should be provided with a safe space where press freedom is completely respected. They should not come under pressure because of the direct access from all over the world to what to the question they ask or the job they do. And another challenge will be to help people who are journalists, I mean media, who are specialized on what's going on in Geneva, to have a kind of I would not say privileged access, but a kind of special access to the actors, because if you know well the ecosystem, the challenges the ecosystem is facing, the functioning of the ecosystem, the extra the ecosystem can provide, the quality of information you can then on which you can then work and give to your public is higher than if the job is done by a person knowing nothing about what's going on in Geneva. And now with the digital, all journalists from all over the world have the same access, the same possibilities of access. And I'm afraid that that specialists will lose their added value, and this is not good for journalism, because if you see during the pandemic, the reading rate exploded. The people who were getting information mainly from social media got back to newspaper to find verified information, because fake news are huge around the pandemic, and the pandemic is just one of example. A lot of people got back to the newspaper to find this kind of verified journalists, this kind of this mediation services provided by media. So I was saying reading rate exploded during the pandemic, but at the same time, media had to face strong financing problems, even stronger than before. Before they were challenged by social media, and now they are challenged to a kind of direct access by the digital space to information, which is in one way very good. I mean, we have more transparency, but on the other side, we miss the whole mediation work that media can provide, and this is not good. So Dylan, I don't know, what do you think? But I still don't have any fixed idea to imagine how the journalist work will be after pandemic in Geneva.
Thank you, Paola. Maybe a sub question. Do you think virtual conferences are worth giving a shot, and would they fit in Geneva as we transition to more face-to-face interactions? Would maybe organizing regular virtual, purely online press conferences fill the gap for some time?
I don't know, Teresa. Can you express more in detail your idea? I cannot visualize it still.
Let's say a press conference in the format like we are having now at this meeting. Do you think that fly in Geneva, and given the tradition and the uniqueness that you've been describing? Can you envisage something like that?
I think we will have to make some tries and see which the result will be, and talk to journalists and listen to journalists. The needs of journalists are different. Here in Geneva, we have journalists from all over the world. The needs of journalists coming from the US are different from the needs of Chinese journalists or African journalists. So I think, it's a possibility, but I still don't have answer in this field.
Yeah, understood. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you for others who have been wandering around from room and room and decided to join this session dedicated to media. You can jump in anytime by just unmuting yourself. And while I'll be keeping an eye of any red button disappearing, I will read another question from the chat, Paola, from our participant Katarina. Have journalists in Geneva experienced challenges, restrictions similar to those experienced by their colleagues across Europe when reporting on the COVID-19 pandemic?
You should ask this question to journalists. I don't think they had big restrictions. Of course, they had to face the competition of the old journalists coming from all over the world and coming in Geneva digital. That's, of course, it's challenging, and of course the restriction not being able to talk directly to the people you meet every day in the Palais des Nations. Of course, because you are sitting home and you have to take your phone and call the people, and maybe the people doesn't answer. And if you go to the Bar de la Presse au Palais des Nations, you can see a lot of people, a lot of diplomats, and get information. You get confirmation for your information. Restriction, not in my, not as far as I know.
Okay. Sorry. You want to continue?
No, it's okay.
That's fine. Okay, perfect. And more questions in the chat. NP is asking, what could media worldwide learn from Geneva-based journalists in response to COVID-19? So is there a lesson that could be shared? Hopefully,
wow. A good one. It's a very, very good question. again, I mean, a journalist, I'm not working as a journalist anymore, but I can imagine that journalists can learn from the people based here in Geneva to think in a wider way, because here, and it's easy for them, they have free access to a lot of very important actors of the global governance. So they can think about an issue related to health, for example, and see the human rights aspect of this issue, because here they have access to actors active in health, in the health system, and access to the people which are active in the human rights field. You know, in this complex world, there is no more issues which are just related to one single context. The problems are complex, and you have to see the different aspect of the problem. And here in Geneva, this kind of work is done, and journalists are used to it. From one side, because the work is done in that way in Geneva, so you see without problem the human rights people discussing with health people, discussing with the people in charge of commerce, or the work is done in that way. And on the other side, the journalists based in Geneva, they have access to this huge variety of actors and fields, I would say, in that way. No. But again, I would be happy if a Geneva-based journalist would be here to answer directly to these questions.
And I'm sure we have some of them among us, so please feel free to jump in anytime. Very interesting question from Virginia Pak. The whole world is learning that they have access to Geneva online. It is now possible because it kind of doesn't matter where you sit and pick up your phone, as you explained. Now, after the pandemic, if Geneva goes back to face-to-face, what happens to global access to Geneva news developments? That kind of everybody is on an equal footing now, but once you go back to face-to-face, will those outside of Geneva have a disadvantage?
No, I don't think so, because I mean, there is no will to close down or to preserve Geneva just for the journalists based here. I think all international organizations have an interest to be as open as possible to journalists from all over the world. We facilitate also the venue of journalists here in Geneva, which in order to help them to, how can I say, capitalize on the rich ecosystem of Geneva. No, I don't think that there will be a will of closing down again, or there will still be a lot of events going on digital, and they were already before the pandemic. I mean, a lot of international organizations are very active on social media. They have website with streaming, with all possible access for people sitting away from Geneva. But again, I don't think that this digital solution will be the only way to make journalism in the future. I mean, I'm maybe old school, but I think the direct access to the people, the physical access to the people, the possibility to have a coffee with a person to get the official version and the backside of the official version, if you know what I mean, will still remain a very important added value in journalism.
Thank you very much, Paola. Now the discussion really picked up, and it's actually time to change the room where we hang out. And we would love to join us for another kind of experiment in online conferencing, which is coffee breaks. I think we are all ready for coffee, and indeed this can happen online, and we can also kind of pick which coffee table we are going to hang out with. So I have just posted a short instruction in the chat that I will repeat also here for your convenience. So we have set up 6 virtual coffee rooms, speed networking, best cafeterias in international Geneva, best city breaks close to Geneva, best places to organize a social event in Geneva. And which ethic has the best view of Geneva? Hint, our director Jovan Kurbalia and Olivier Couto have mentioned it actually in their opening remarks. And if you need a little cigarette, a smoker's corner is available as well. You will just click on the link that I shared in the chat, the kind of main page for this event. And as you got to this breakout room, the same way will be used to get to the coffee break. At this moment, I would like to thank Paola and see you at one of the coffee breaks.
Thanks to you guys. Thanks to you, Teresa.
Thank you.
Thank you.